सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Verse number 38 we are in the middle of. So let us chant that and then continue. स्वप्ने मन्त्रोपदेशश्रवणपरिचितः सत्य एष प्रबोधे स्वप्नादेव प्रसादादभिलषितफलं सत्यतां प्रातरेति सत्यप्राप्तिस्त्वसत्यादपि भवति तथा किञ्च तत् स्वप्रकाशम् येनेदं भाति सर्वं चरमचरमथोच्चावचं दृश्यजातम्. So we saw the very effective example, and what is the effective example is that of the dream. And here the holiest of dreams are given so that everybody can connect to them very very nicely, and immediately one can connect to them. And what is that dream? Receiving mantra diksha from one's guru. And so then what happens as a result? As a result, when you wake up, something happens. The effects of the dream, even though the dream is falsified upon waking, the effects of the dream in the form of a surprise, wonder, calmness of mind, etc., are still persisting upon waking. And so this is what we saw. And this is to establish the connection of the reality, quote unquote, the reality of the dream as a subjective projection within the empirical projection of Bhagavan. So you see, there are two projections now. First projection is the Jagat, which we talked about last time as touch and go. Jayate, gacchati, comes and goes, is born, is gone. And so this is the Jagat. And so in this Jagat, in this vast Jagat, which itself is a projection of Bhagavan in the form of memory from the last cycle of creation, which was again infallible, and the desire of the jivas, like a toddler going in the supermarket or in the toy shop, going from one aisle to another and crying its head off each time it is apprehended. We saw that. And so this projection, the desire of the jivas mingled with the knowledge and memory of Bhagavan. Knowledge and memory are one thing here. The knowledge of how to project, how to take back, all this constitutes the jnanam of Bhagavan. And the jiva has what? All the desires wanting to be embodied in order to fulfill the desires. So the jiva is not happy being one with Ishvara in an unmanifest condition, because what's the fun in that? And then so the jiva has a familiar refrain: let me out, I need to express myself. You can express yourself, you are Ishvara, but I need to express myself. And Ishvara says, calm down, we are having a nice, what should I say, we are having a nice Brahman experience, a self-experience of sort, everything is one. No. I mean, this is of course an imaginary conversation, because even to have this conversation we are assuming there is already a kind of an as-though split. So this is just for the sake of assimilation of what is being said. So the urgency of the jiva to take on a body is primarily due to desires. Let me out, I want to go out of Brahman, so to speak. I want to be myself, just like a 2-year-old in the toy shop. And then Bhagavan, what can Bhagavan say other than Tathastu? Bhagavan puts on a crown of Aishwarya, overlordship, and then just projects this whole universe, and the jiva plays, like a toddler, until the jiva gets tired. And then what does the jiva says? Let me in. First, what was that? Let me out. And now let me back in. I want to be one with you. Kaha ho tum? Where are you? Give me darshan. Take me. I want oneness. I want Advaita. Where are the gurus? Where are the teachers? Where is the Shastra? Where is the Upanishad? Help! I'm drowning. In what? In the soup of my in the samsara soup of my own making. Let me in. And then Bhagavan, being Bhagavan, says Tathastu. Guru comes, Shastra comes. In fact, they come together. And then after that, thank God, thank God, Trahimam, Pahimam, the Upanishad is helping me, saving me, wonderful. And then what else, next cycle of creation, let me out, and then let me in. And I don't know who this cycle of creation is entertaining, and except perhaps the Jnani and Bhagavan, but this is how it continues. And so here, the desire manifest in the dream to have a sacred desire, to have closeness with the teacher, to have been initiated by the teacher, is in the morning. Prabodhe has got some accoutrements of quote unquote reality. Here, Vyavaharika Satta, the reality of the empirical world. And we saw last time the empirical world is nothing but a projection of Bhagavan, and that projection, the technical name for this empirical world is Mithya. Mithya doesn't mean false, it doesn't mean illusion, it means a dependent reality. We saw that. And this dependent reality is non-separate from the projector. That is what the point of this dream example is. Just like your dream is non-separate from you, your own memory, your own desires have conspired to project this dream. And then what? So we saw that prasadat abhilashita phalam satyatam pratah iti. And pratah iti. So in the morning, everything, you feel like you've got the desired prasad. And then he makes a very interesting point from the drishtanta, the example of the dream. Now we are moving to the darshtanta. Darshtanta means that which the dream example exemplifies. What is the point of the example we are going to see now? Satyapraptihi, third line, Satyapraptihi tu asatyadapi bhavati. Satyapraptihi means the real can come from the unreal, so to speak. Tatha kimcha tat swaprakasham. So that we'll see later. Satyapraptihi tu asatyadapi bhavati. So the real can come from the unreal. What an interesting point to make. That means what? We are on the shores, we are lapping, we are washing our feet against the lapping waves of the shores of Buddhism here. Because it's all about shunya, nothingness. And this nothingness is, becomes the cause of everything, including sorrow. What is the truth of the Jagat? Nothing. What is the truth of you as the Jiva? Nothing. And what is Bhagavan? Bhagavan Buddha himself was silent on the subject, we are told. And so the later Buddhists have divided themselves according to how much shunyata they want in their theology. How much zero-ness. Zero, zero, zero. And you see, there is a very big contradiction here. Because as soon as you say the word zero, then what we do, we are very alert here, because after all, fed on the diet of logic, Nyaya, Upanishad, Shastra and Sanskrit grammar, which makes one very, very, very sharp. If you want to be sharp, study Sanskrit. Really, there's no other way. You just become so present. Even if you think you're not making any any headway in Sanskrit, you become very sharp, and then nobody can defeat you in an argument, because your argument becomes so logical. It is just amazing. And so here, so in this culture with so much logic and everything, it's just a matter of just a few brain cells rubbing against each other to come to the conclusion. What is the conclusion? That there is no such thing as zero. Why? I mean, very simple, logically established in 1 second. There is no zero. The truth of the Jagat cannot be nothingness. Why? Because if you say, I am nothing, that means what? You are denying yourself, but the I is already pre established, Swatasiddha. It is already self effulgent. So it cannot be denied. If you say, I'm non existent, it's like a child saying, don't look behind the couch, I'm not hiding behind the couch. That means what? You're advertising your own existence, like the child. And so, at least the child has an excuse. It is small, it doesn't have viveka. What is your excuse? To say that the whole world is zero. You cannot leave out the sayer, the one who is articulating that the Jagat is zero, that the Jiva is zero. Is it an existent conscious being or not? You are constrained to say, yes, I am an existent conscious being. And then what do we have to say? Then shut up. Then there's no more, keep quiet. Keep quiet, keep silent. What else? There is nothing more to say. There is nothing more to say, because if you want to contradict yourself, then then we have nothing more to talk to you about. Anything else. Because the self contradiction is an impossibility. The self being self evident, self existent. The self is the one that is saying everything else is zero. And the one who says that I am zero cannot be zero, because that one who is saying I am zero is an existent conscious being, self existent conscious being, whose existence does not have to be ratified by yet one more force in the universe. This is something which is very, very logical, and we don't have to spend much more time on this, because this is very experientially felt. I cannot deny myself. It is a matter of experiential knowledge for the experience buffs in the room. And so then what? Then we have a Shruti Vakya. Shruti Vakya means the sentence, either the third sentence here in this Shatashloki. Satya Praptihi tu asatyadapi bhavati. Something can come out of nothing. This is the contention. Even though we know that nothing, what can you come, if not out of non-existent, what can come out of non-existence? Only non-existence can come. Existence cannot come out of non-existence, and this the Bhagavad Gita also establishes. Na asato vidyate bhavah, 18th verse of the second chapter. And for that, Adi Shankara had to, pull an all-nighter. 2-3 all-nighters he had to pull to write the Bhashya. 4-5 pages of Bhashya with so many objections and so many resolutions of those objections. Asatah bhavah na vidyate. That which is non-existent does not have a leg to stand on. Nothing comes out of it. It is nothing. Nothing can come out of it. Na bhavo vidyate, na abhavaha vidyate satah. And that which is existent, namely yourself, as Satchidanandam Brahma, as Jagat Karanam Brahma, as the truth of this whole universe, cannot be denied. Your existence, that which is existent, cannot be made to be non-existent. That which is non-existent to begin with cannot be, cannot suddenly become existent. उभयोरपि दृष्टोन्तः त्वनयोः तत्त्वदर्शिभिः. So the truth of both existence and non-existence is wonderfully understood by the people who know the self, who know the tattva. This is the Bhagavad Gita Vakya. Then here we seem to have an apparent contradiction with the Shatashloki writer saying what? Saying asatyadapi satyapraptihi bhavet. From the non-existent has come the existent. This is just a so-called or an apparent contradiction. The Shruti wants to keep you on your toes so that there is no possibility of multitasking while studying the Upanishad. You know, one thinks one is paying attention, but one is filing the nails, one is doing something while listening to the Upanishads. And then what? And then suddenly one is jarred. Arey, what happened all of a sudden? I had Vedanta down. I had trapped Vedanta. I thought I knew. I had memorized all these Gita verses. I had done all my homework. I know I am Svatah Siddha Atma, self-evident self I am, I know. And out of the non-existent nothing can come, I know. And the existent alone is as though manifest as the whole Jagat. This Brahman, which I am in the process of knowing, I know. Check, check. I am Brahman, check. And I am self-evident Atma, check. And then what? Then just my dream is the projection of myself in the form of my dream is just a microcosmic example to illustrate the projection of Ishvara's projection of the Jagat. Check. Aha, I know. And then what? Asatyadapi satya praptihi bhavati. Third line of Shatashloki, verse 38. Then up till now it was check, check, check. Now what? Check out, because I don't understand. So this is the way of the Shruti keeping the mind sharp. It is not a contradiction. You find these things that are there all over the various Upanishads. Yan manasa eva manute. Yan manasa na manute. Kenopanishad says that which is not gained by the mind, because that which you are trying to understand, namely yourself, is not an object, it is the very subject, it is the content, the nature of the subject. Okay, then you go and graze in the grasses of the Kathopanishad. You are the hungry cow, okay? So then you go and graze in the grasses of the Kathopanishad, just for a little change. And then there it says, Manasa eva idam aptavyam. Only with the help of the mind you can understand this. There seemed to be a contradiction. First, Kenopanishad says, forget the mind, you won't get this. And then the Kathopanishad says, without the mind you will not get this. Contradiction. Really? No. Apparent contradiction. The contradiction is only on the surface, as though contradiction, because there is really cannot be a contradiction. What the Kenopanishad, we have to see it in context. The Kenopanishad is trying to negate the possibility of the mind being an agent of this knowledge. And the Kathopanishad is underscoring the fact that the mind is a receptacle where the knowledge takes place. The mind is a place where the knowledge happens and shines. But the mind is not the producer of this knowledge, because the knowledge is not a product. This is how we have to understand it. And this so-called reconciliation of the various apparent contradictions in the Upanishads is called Samanvaya, which constitutes the fourth sutra in the Brahma Sutra, Tattu Samanvayat, that which is understood through this reconciliation. After this apartheid, there was they had established in South Africa Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So here also we have in the Bhashya a reconciliation of truth commission in the Sampradaya. How this truth of this I being everything is reconciled on the small things, so that there is no confusion. All the confusions are made threadbare by washing it out on the washboard of the Shastra. And it's the Guru that bashes the all these wrong thoughts, wrong ideas that one can easily go into. The Guru bashes it on the washboard of the Upanishads, and the mind of the jiva is made threadbare of ragadveshas and holding on to the dirt notions. Gone. And so the mind of the adhikari looks somewhat like those jeans which the modern teenagers wear. More holes than fabric, all made threadbare. In fact, that's more costly, I hear, than the jeans which have fabric. Okay? So that is how it is. So the mind is made threadbare of all notions, so that the Upanishad sinks in, the Upanishad becomes the very fabric of one's being. And so here in line 3, another apparent contradiction is alluded to, an important contradiction, so to speak, an apparent contradiction which is very salient in our understanding of the Shastra. And it is very important to understand this, because without this the Upanishad will always be like a hazy distant star which you can admire from afar. And so this is, this concerns the opening verses mantra of the 6th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad, and the opening mantra of the 7th chapter of the Taittiriya Upanishad. Apparent contradiction, red light, like the sirens in the police car, the wailing sirens. So then we go to the grass patch known as the Chandogya Upanishad, the 6th chapter, the famous chapter where Shvetaketu, the little, our know-it-all fellow, our know-it-all university grad, is shown to be not so rad after an exposure to this knowledge, becomes humble and understands the truth of himself, corrected, reprimanded, and then finally taught by his father turned teacher Uddalaka. And then Uddalaka begins the teaching like this: Sat eva somya idam agre asit. Idam agre, before all this came into manifestation, this whole jagat of name and form that you are able to see in the universe and interact with in the universe, before all this came into being, there was one thing and one thing alone, and let us call it Sat, the existent thing. That's all we'll say about it, Uddalaka says. And then later on, talking about this Sat as the truth of everything, giving the example of one clay, million pieces of earthenware, pot, and little clay cat, clay dog, clay animals, clay figurines, clay Lord Krishna, clay lid, clay jug, everything. And then all of them come from clay, sustained by clay, resolve unto clay. Another example, one gold, a million ornament, all kinds of rings, nose ring, ear ring, this ring, that ring. Hope it rings a bell here. We have studied this before. This ring, that ring, and then bangle and chain, all these things made of gold. Made of gold means what? Without gold they have no leg to stand on. So in relation to the gold, the ornaments are mithya. Gold is Sat. in relation to the earthenware. Earthenware is an as though projection dependent upon its sat, which is the earth, clay. Clayware, earthenware goes back to earth. That's why it's called earthenware. And then what? Similarly, tat sat, that sat which I spoke out, sa atma tattvamasi Shvetaketu. Hey Shvetaketu, Shvetu, what is that? That Sat which I talked about earlier as being pre-existent before the manifest Jagat came into being, that is you. That is not outside of you. That is cognized as you. That is the self-evident, non-negatable you, out of which everything has as though come. So this we have understood very well. Check. This is from the opening mantra of the sixth chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad. Then we take a little trip into what is called the Taittiriya Upanishad, the seventh chapter, seventh Anuvaka of the Taittiriya Upanishad, which seems to contradict the very sentence that we saw. And what was the sentence? Sadeva Somya idam agre asit. Oh dear one, hey Somya, Sat eva, Sat alone was asit, idam agre, before all this came into being. And then the seventh chapter of the Taittiriya Upanishad is a shocker. Asadva idam agre asit, tato vai sadajayata, tadatmanam swayam akuruta, tasmat tat sukrutam uchyata iti. Complete contradiction, so to speak, but contradiction, apparent contradiction. Asat vai idam agre asit. Before all this came into being, there was asat, means non, that which was non-existent alone, and tataha, from that non-existent, why indeed sat ajayata, sat has come. Okay, now how are we going to understand this? This is what when we read the third line of the verse 38 in Shatashloki, this is what we are reminded of. And this contradiction we have to, this as though contradiction we have to as though reconcile before moving forward, even to the fourth line or beyond here, because here is where the problem is, and the problem is in not understanding what this Sat is. And here the word Sat is used differently in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Asat vai idam agre asit. Here Asat means unmanifest indeed was the truth of everything. Unmanifest indeed was this Jagat before this manifestation came into being. It doesn't mean non-existent, it means unmanifest indeed was this being. And then tataha, from the unmanifest, sat ajayata, came the manifest universe. The manifest universe has come from the unmanifest. And then, and then so that one doesn't take this to be from non-existent has come the existent, then the Shruti in the Taittiriya Upanishad reiterates Raso Vaisaha Rasagyevayam Labdhva Nandi Bhavati, that this Atma is not non-existent. You are not non-existent. The truth of you is not non-existence. Rasaha Vaisaha, it is Rasaha means it is existence itself. It is self-evident, self which is limitless and therefore the source of happiness. Unbridled joy is the truth of yourself. And so Raso Vaisaha, it is dripping with joy like a gulab jamun taken out of its pan, dripping with sugar syrup. That is you. Rasam hi eva ayam labdhva, gaining this Atma. What happens? Nandi bhavati. Oh, you become Nandi sitting in front of Shiva? No, no, no. Here Nand, short for Anandi bhavati. Short for becomes delighted with oneself, delighted with the universe. And so this is where we look, this is how we reconcile this. And so the Shatashloki is talking about the manifestation from the unmanifest state. The manifest world has come, and this manifest world, so satya prapti tu asatyadapi bhavati. So the dream, as though, has come from this non-existent place. One can think the dream has come from the non-existent place, but no, it is a manifestation of what? Of your own memory, knowledge, desire. There is nothing else other than that. But to the one who is not understanding this, it looks like as though it has come from a state of unmanifestation, a non-existent. So it is not non-existent at all. It is unmanifest to manifest, and then back to unmanifest. So there is no non-existent. So here the word, the word asat has to be understood as unmanifest. So this would what be line number 3. And then the last line, let us look at. Then kim cha tat swaprakasham. Kim cha, what to talk about? What to talk about? The Atma. Swaprakasham means, Swaprakasha means the self-lit Atma, the source of all knowledge. Everything that you look at is knowledge, and the source of all knowledge is this Atma alone. Yena idam bhati, because of which shines sarvam, everything, charam acharam, moving and non-moving, atha, and furthermore, uchcha avacham. Uchcha means high, avacha low. Everything high and low, variegated and non-variegated, moving and non-moving, sentient and insentient, what? Drishya jatam, the host of things that can be seen, that can be touched, that can be understood, that can be inferred. In other words, that which you can, the whole host of this world that can be objectified by the sense organs. So, in other words, what? There is the Swatasiddha Atma, self-evident I. Okay? So, the self-evident I is very much there. It's the center of everything. And from the unmanifest Jagat, the knowledge and the Shakti, we saw all this last time, the Shakti and the knowledge lent to this self-evident I from an this as though Shakti lent to this self-evident I, which has this as though Shakti has also come out of this self-evident I, and equipped with this as though Shakti, this self-evident I takes on the mantle, takes on the status called Jagat Karta, the creator of the universe, Ishvara. Putting the Ishvara hat on, this self-evident I, from a state of unmanifestation, that knowledge from its own existence brings out all the world of names and forms. And then this self-evident I, wearing the hat of the Jiva, the one who said, let me out, I want to have my own projections and own universe, goes to sleep at night along with a billion other people, and then what? And then has a small dream of getting mantropadesha from the memory and the desire of the small little jiva, and the small little jiva's memory and desire and the ability to project is included in the vast projection, is your own free will, is your own desire, is your own memory. That's why we don't try to control the desire, because they are Bhagavan, manifestation of Bhagavan. We only can manage them, and that desire management is the topic of the Bhagavad Gita, is the very very big topic. Bhagavad Gita is the topic. And then so the manifestation is an as though manifestation, like even your dream. Upon waking, the manifestation is swallowed up. The manifest dream goes back into a state of unmanifestation. And so likewise, when the desires of the jivas are as though exhausted, the cycle of creation is swallowed up by Ishvara. Ishvara is no longer having Aishwarya or overlordship, but Ishvara is still Ishvara as I, self evident Satchidananda I. So then, this whole universe of name, form, etc., all of this has come. And so the dream state here in verse 38, as I told you when I introduced this verse, um, is performing a slightly different purpose, to show the projection within a projection. That is how the dream has to be understood, as a subjective projection within the objective projection of Bhagavan. Both are mithya. This is mithya within mithya, also known as pratibhasika. Pratibhasika is a subjective, totally subjective projection, specific to you and your own desires. And then Ishvara's projection, objective projection. That's why we can see the laws, we can agree on certain things, we can study the laws, all these things are there. And so it's an objective projection, because everybody can agree that the world is round, unless there are some few who still die hard of the flat earth theory, conspiracy theologies. They are still there. And uh, and then uh, so the, everybody can agree that the seasons, one season come after another. After winter, spring comes, everybody can agree, because it is universal. So this universal projection also dependent on Sat, these self-evident I, and then the personal projection also dependent on Sat. And then what's the difference between the personal projection and the universal projection? Both are mithya, but the personal projection is mithya within mithya. It's entirely subjective, entirely standing on the force of one's own desires. So that is what this verse illustrates. So let us look at verse number 39. Let us move to verse 39. मध्यप्राणं सुषुप्तौ स्वजनिमनुविशन्त्यग्निसूर्यादयो मे वागाद्याः प्राणवायुं तदिह निगदिता ग्लानिरेशान्नवायोः तेभ्यो दृश्यावभासो भ्रम इति विदितः शुक्तिकारौप्यकल्पः प्राणायामव्रतं तच्छ्रुतिशिरसि मतं स्वात्मलब्धौ न चान्यत्. So this is, what is the segue? The segue is a little interesting, little difficult to find from verse 38 to 39, and so we'll see what the segue is. So Anandagiri in his Tikas gives a very nice segue. He says, evam swapna nidarshanena jagan mithyatvam nirupya idanim jagat सत्यत्व अभिव्यञ्जिकायां जागृत्यामपि तन्मिथ्यात्वं निरूपयति मध्य इति. So he has a very interesting segue, which is very beautiful and precise. And what does he say? Evam, in this manner, meaning what? In verse 38, what did we see? Swapna nidarshanena, using the dream example, Jagan mithyatvam nirupya, the author having established the mithyatvam of the Jagat, the dependent reality of the Jagat on this Satchidananda Atma. Then, so Jagat satyatva abhivyanjikayam, Jagat satyatva abhivanjikayam jagratyamapi tan mithyatvam nirupayati. So he says that, not just in the dream, but that the Jagat is mithya, but we have shown in verse 38. But what does the author want to do? Jagrityamapi, even in the waking state, this whole Jagat is mithya. This is to be shown. this is going to be shown, because it's not enough to dismiss the dream as mithya. Now we are back to the individual after samashti, after seeing the whole universe, the universal example that the dream has illustrated, that the world is a projection, that we have understood through one's own personal projection. But then one is back to the three states of experience here. One is back to the three states of experience, and here what is the point that is being made? A very, very important point. And this important point is that even while you are awake, the jagat is mithya. Don't think that the Jagat is mithya only in your sleep and in the dream, and then in the waking state the Jagat suddenly becomes real. This is everybody's problem. This is what is called samsara, that in the waking state the Jagat becomes real, and in the sleeping state it is dismissed. And so, therefore, how do you keep this going? What is that which inheres the sleep, dream, and waking state that I can catch hold of in order to see the truth of myself as permanent and the Jagat as impermanent? How do I do this on a daily basis? Are there any sadhanas? And the answer is yes. And here the pranayama as an important sadhana to disengage the mind and the senses from attaching, so to speak, from clawing to the objects in the Jagat, is advocated in a very interesting way in the 39th verse. Let us see the verse itself. Madhya pranam. What is this madhya prana? So prana means the respiration here. Respiration, and also not just respiration, but there are 5 kinds of pranas. When you say prana, immediately you think of respiration, because that seems to be the one that is easily objectifiable. But then we have apana, elimination, that is also called prana. So this prana is a 5-fold vital airs, life force, whatever you want to call it. Apana, elimination, and then vyana, circulation. Then samana, digestion. So prana, respiration. So prana, vyana, apana, samana, circulation. Vyana, circulation, samana, digestion. All digestive things that are happening, assimilation. And then finally udana. Everybody knows what udana is. It's the counter. When we have mantra japa, we have a little counter, okay? Because you have to say the mantra 1,000 times, 2,000 times, like this. And then Om Namo Bhagavate Dakshinamurtaye Mahyam Shriyam Medham Pragyam Prayachha Swaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Dakshinamurtaye Mahyam Priyam Medham Pragyam Prayachha Swaha. So you count it. And then usually in the ashrams and all, the counting apparatus is given to the Swami. Okay, you sit and count. That's how I know. So the Swami sits and counts, and then everybody is chanting and doing archana to the kalasha or to everything. People are doing all these things and so that everybody can be immersed in the japa. And Swami does enough japa in the spare time, so now you be the monitor and make sure that the other people are doing the japa properly. You sit and count. And before this counter came, we had of course the mala, but that's not as much fun in this example as the counter. Then after the last 8 are left, the Swami does like this, okay? and the priest sees the hand of the Swami, and then Uchair Ghosha begins, and you start, because everybody is kind of lagging behind now. Half the people are, elderly people in the back are sleeping, and then because there is a nice lull when the mantra starts coming, and then suddenly, Om Namo Bhagavate Dakshinamurtaye Makyam Shriyam Medham Pragyam Prayachha Swaha. Loudly the mantra starts because only 8 or 10 are left. And then everybody suddenly gets the second wind and everybody chants together. And then after 8, then okay, done. So Udana Vayu is something like this counter. The question is, it also is doing mantra ucharana. No, 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 no. It is not chanting the mantra. What is Udana Vayu doing? It is counting how many times you breathe in and out. You come out of the mother's womb, click, one. and then and then and then at age 2 you hyperventilate. Why? Simply because a sibling was born. Until then you were enjoying the mom and dad completely. They were your Ishvara and Ishvari. And now Ishvara and Ishvari have another, rat like thing which is crying all the time. And so you have a tantrum and you hyperventilate. Udana Vayu, tick 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 tick. It's counting, 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 counting. Counting, counting, counting. This is Udana. Because one does not come into the world, the Shastra says, with what? With a number of years. An allotted number of years one does not come into the world with. One comes into the world with an allotted number of breaths. And therefore the yogis thought they should outwit Lord Yama, because Lord Yama and Udana Vayu are the best of friends. Because when the last 10 breaths are left, Udana Vayu, like the Swami, goes like this to the priest. Priest here is Lord Yama. And then so all kinds of health problems start in the last minute. Person is put on life support and all kinds of, feeding tube, this tube, that tube, one tube going here, one tube in the nose, one tube here, one tube there, everything, one tube. So the tubes take over all the pranic functions. Catheter takes away the apana vayu function, it helps to eliminate. And then something to digest, something, because it cannot with the nasal feeding, stomach tube feeding, all these things happen. So Udana Vayu, is told by Lord Yama. Udana Vayu and Lord Yama indicate to each other only 10 more breaths left. This the person, call the loved ones. Finished, done. And so like this, sometimes there is ucha ghosha, there is the loud, the impending end of life is announced in some jivas, and in some jivas quietly it is not even announced, like in a sudden death, something like that. It's not even known, not even known to the world. Udana Vayu is the only one that knows. Lord Yama knows. And so what did the yogis do? The Yoga Shastra is all about Ayuhu. And why do you need life? Why do you need long life? You don't need long life in order to enjoy. That's not the sign of a yogi. That's the sign of a bhogi, the one who is a conspicuous consumer bhogi, not a yogi, a sadhaka, a seeker. So the yogi's life is entirely different. The yogi's life, the yogi wants long life so that the prarabdha continues, so that one can get moksha in this life itself. So there is more time to meditate, more time to study, more time to get rid of ragadveshas. That's why the yogis in the olden times wanted to elongate the life. And so they thought they found a runaround to this Udana Vayu, one of the 5 pranas, by breathing once a day through the exercise of various pranayamas, from the simple anuloma viloma, alternate nostril breathing, one graduate, and then the forceful bhastrika, bellows breath, and which is, which is very, very effective for digestion, etc. From the simple anuloma viloma, with meeting the bellows breath along the way, and then ending up in breathing. Once in a while, when somebody shakes you and reminds you, you say, okay. And then when will you breathe out? Maybe tomorrow. So then, then when the focus was on this, then what happens? Then since the number of breaths is what is counting your life, when you slow down the breathing, you naturally live longer. And again I say, why to live longer? In order to exhaust the prarabdha completely and use this human life, because who knows what one will be in the next life, to use this human life for the sake of self improvement, emotional maturity, gaining of knowledge, etc. This is what the whole thing is. So these are the five pranas with which one is all the time invested with in one's whole life. And so now what is the point of this verse? He says, let us look at the sleep cycle. In the sleep, what happens? The pranas come to a rest. All activities come to rest in a certain way. So Madhya Prana here doesn't mean actually prana. It's Virat, it's Bhagavan here, Hiranyagarbha. They go to a unmanifest state. So all the pranas go into a state of unmanifestation. Digestion is non-existent in sleep. Little bit may be there, but it is very, very. They go into a causal level. The causal level, don't get confused. Causal level means they just resolve in the cause of the universe. So there is hardly any kind of a digestion. And of course, unless one is having unless one is a child or having some kind of a health problem, there is no elimination happening in the state of sleep. No samana, no apana. And the circulation also is very low. That's why the BP upon waking, the blood pressure, if you measure, is very, very low. And the circulation is silent. Everything is silent. So that is what the point of this first line is. Madhya pranam anuvishanti. Madhya pranam here is the unmanifest source of the jagat in the form of Hiranyagarbha. Anuvishanti, all the pranas enter, wish to enter. Anuvishanti, they enter. Anu means in accordance to the laws of the universe. Anuvishanti. When sushuptau, sushupti sthiti. So in the state of deep sleep, sushuptau anuvishanti. Swajanim madhya pranam. Swajanim qualifies madhya pranam. Swajani means that unmanifest Hiranyagarbha, the cause of the universe, in an unmanifest state. Swajani means the causeless cause. So they get into a causal state because they enter the causeless cause. So swasya janihi swajanihi. So swajanim tam anuvishanti. They enter in accordance to the laws of the universe. And Agni Suryadi Suryadayah Ami. Ami means all these. All these what? And very interesting here, he doesn't say prana. He says Agni, fire, Surya, the sun, Adi Padat, all other things, the earth and all the other elements, sun, moon, all the other elements, etc., enter into a causal state. Where? In your sleep. Because for two reasons. One is you are not aware of the sun in sleep. The sun is as good as non-existent, and the moon is as good as non-existent. Fire is as good as non-existent from the standpoint of your sleep. One meaning. But a deeper meaning we have to take here is that these are the adhishthana devatas, the presiding deities of the various pranic and mind functions. This is something very, very beautiful. Very, very beautiful. In the Hindu tradition, we have the whole connection from the Vyashti to the Samashti, from the individual to the total. There is a series of connections, and when the world is understood from this series of connection, clarity is what ensues. Clarity and a sense of wholeness, even in the relative world, is what ensues. It's a very healthy tradition to be brought up under, because you never feel alienated. Why? Because you see the world from three standpoints. Adi Daivika, from the standpoint of the laws of the universe, including the laws that govern your own prana, your own respiration, your own elimination, your own circulation, digestion, etc. Adi Daivika, centered on Bhagavan. Devam adhikritya tishtati, centered on Bhagavan. This is called Adi Daivika, where everything is centered on Bhagavan. Then Adi Bhautika, centered on the five elements and everything that has come from the five elements, the elementals. Then that's the second standpoint from which you can view this universe and the truth of the universe. And then the final standpoint is Adhyatmika. Atmanam adhikritya tishtati. Bhutanam adhikritya tishtati adibhautika, and then Atmanam adhikritya tishtati adhyatmika, centered on I. So the same one thing you can take, anything you can take in the universe. Take air, the element of air can be viewed, even though it is five elements and technically it comes under adhibhautika, it can be viewed from all the standpoints. Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi. There is a prayer in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Namaste to Vayu. Oh, I revered you, I worship you, I salute you. Who are you? Hey Vayu, oh the air, I salute you. You are Brahman, you are Bhagavan for me. Pratyaksha, that which I can experience directly. So this is Vayu from the standpoint of Adi Bhautika and Adi Daivika here. You are Bhagavan. You are the manifestation of Bhagavan. And then if you take a deep breath, what happens to Vayu? It becomes Prana, Adhyatmika. And then there is another Upanishad that says, Prano Vai Ishvaraha. That Prana is to be seen as Ishvara. You see how that, and then there is a law. So this Adi Bhautika Vayu, which is invoked as Bhagavan, this is also Bhagavan. Prana is Bhagavan. And what is the law that governs the Vayu going in your nostrils and then to your lungs? And then purifying your blood and your very being, and then being eliminated in the form of, what is that? Exhalation, carbon dioxide. What is that law? That is also Bhagavan Adi Daivika. So the Vayu as Adi Daivika, that which takes many forms. It helps a fire come to being in one place, and then it helps a fire spread in another place. It extinguishes the fire in the third place, the same Vayu. And then yet one more place, it makes the Vayu go in the lungs, go out of the lungs, that same, and that Vayu is governed by Bhagavan. And the Vayu here is what? Adhishthana Devata of Prana. It's the presiding deity. Presiding, so similarly, all our sense organs have presiding deities, manifestations of Bhagavan that you can immediately connect to. You don't have to have a puja room. You don't have to go sit in front of the altar and sing bhajans. You right here you can say. When you say, I see very well, Bhagavan, right there. The one that is blessing the eyes is Surya in the form of Bhagavan. The one that is blessing the Vayu, the Prana, is Vayu in the form of Bhagavan. The one that is blessing the mind is Chandra, the moon, cool, borrowed light, just like the mind shines in borrowed light. So the presiding deity of the mind is the moon. And in fact, in the horoscope, okay, yeah, then when if the moon is not well placed, there could be some, derangement, from garden variety derangement to psychosis, everything you can see from the placement of the moon in the horoscope. And so, like this, all the activities of the prana go back to their adhishthana devatas. That is the idea. So, this is just a short little glimpse of this beautiful verse, and more we'll see next week. Okay, and I have a small announcement. We have a upcoming, what is it called? We have an upcoming retreat for this long weekend, and that is happening on from Friday to Monday. And then I'm going to send you in PDF. I'm going to post a flyer. Please look at it. Please download it. So in order to download it, double click on the chat pod, which is chat button, which is there at the bottom of your screen, and then you will see that it has come. And the title of this is Jan 15th to 18th retreat.pdf. So we'll be studying a very important mantra from the Mandukya Upanishad, na antah pragyam na bahish pragyam, etc. Very nice and a cryptic mantra. So I hope that you will all enjoy. And so that is the announcement I wanted to make. So that is the thing. So I hope everybody got that. If not, you can send it to each other, and I will also post it on the Adobe Room. Okay, all right. ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः 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 हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ. There is one question here. If the universe is mithya, how can it be a manifestation of Sat? Doesn't the manifestation mean Sat is being transited to some other form, while mithya is being projections? No, mithya is projection of one's own ignorance is called pratibhasika, subjective projection. Mithya is Bhagavan's projection. It is not separate from Sat. It's an as though projection, so there is no contradiction. Sat doesn't undergo any change. Just like when you dream, you do not undergo any change upon waking. If you dream you have lost 15 pounds, okay, upon waking and you get on the scale, that will not be Satyam. Okay, so similarly, Sat manifests many things without losing weight or undergoing any change. So there is no contradiction. All right. Okay, all the best. See you this weekend. Oh,
Thank you so
thank you. Take care. Om Om.
much.